This is the Know Your Law series by Barefoot Law, a non-profit organization which uses digital innovation and technology to provide free legal information and guidance for all. For more information, visit www.barefootlaw.org.
Hello everyone, my name is Anna Magembe. I am at Barefoot Law today to talk about what happens when you pass away or when your loved ones passes away. What happens to their property? How can you distribute their property? What does the law say about all this? Some people, before they pass away, they have drafted wills already. So all the property is distributed in accordance to that. Before I continue, if you want to know anything about wills, how to draft wills, the format of drafting wills, or issues pertaining to wills, Barefoot Law has a video that you can check out in the link below. So let's continue. Someone has died, a loved one has died, and they have died when they have left a will. That means they have died testate. It is called dying testate. So if someone dies testate, that means in the will, they have mentioned how their property should be distributed, where they should be buried, who the guardian of their children, the preferred guardian of their children is. Everything that should be done after that should be done in accordance with the wishes that were expressed in the will. And that is on condition that the will is not an invalid will. That is, you are not coerced into making the will. Someone did not just forge your will and say this is your will as well, and it was validly attested to, that is witnessed. It has two witnesses that signed on it and witness that actually these are your wishes. Otherwise, it will not be considered a valid will. And if it's not considered a valid will, then you will have deemed to have died intestate. This is what we are going to talk about next. Dying intestate means that you have died without a will. If you die intestate, it means that your property and all the other things will be dealt with in accordance with the law and the customs of your family as well. And if at all your will was also considered invalid, then the distribution of your property and all other things will be considered in accordance with the law and the customs of the property. So let's talk about what happens when someone dies. What happens is that all property is vested into a personal representative. If the person died without a will, then the property is vested into someone called an administrator or administrators if there are many. If a person died with a will, having drafted a will, that means that the property will be vested in someone called an executor or executors. So for those people to actually deal with the property, distribute the property, access the bank accounts, access the dividends, as well as have transfer of the shares if the person has shares, whatever way the person, or access their NSSF benefits, they will be required to apply to court and be granted a grant of probate if a person died having drafted a will, and a grant of letters of administration if the person died without a will. And there are 3 offices or 4 offices that you will have to go to as you process these documents. The first office that you will have to go to is the National Identification Registration Authority, NIRA. And there, the office is mandated to register all births and deaths of all Ugandans. The second office that you have to go to is the Administrator General's office. The Administrator General sits in Kampala, and there are people at each district that perform the duties of the Administrator General, and that is the Chief Administrative Officer of the districts. I'm going to explain later what these officers do when I talk about the processes of obtaining the grant of probate, as well as the process of obtaining letters of administration. The other office is definitely the courts of law. So why do you need these documents? You need these documents, one, to access all bank accounts of the deceased person. You need these documents to transfer ownership of land, shares, and other properties of the deceased into the names of the administrator and into the names of the beneficiaries. You need these documents to access any retirement benefits of the deceased. These are some of the reasons as to why you actually need those documents. I understand that there could be a family out there, a relative out there that probably they lost their beloved one years ago. They have the loved one left property, left pension, left gratuity, as well as probably NSSF benefits, and they don't know how to actually access that, or they're waiting to find a buyer, then be able to actually go through the process. I advise that you actually start on the process right now, so that you do not wait for that time, because the process is quite long. You do not have to wait for that time. You have a buyer, and then you cannot transfer or give the person good title, because the certificate of title is probably still registered in the names of the deceased person. So I am here to help you get to know the process of obtaining this document, that is the letters of administration as well as the grant of probate. Where do you start? Have a meeting as a family and choose who will be an administrator. If there's already been an executor, if it's a will, then that's it. If someone left a will, it's advisable that this will is read before the person is buried, because you never know what the person talked about where they would like to be buried. After you've had this meeting as a family, and if someone died having left a will, then the executor is known. And if they died without a will, then the family is deciding or has decided on who should be the administrator of the estate of the deceased. Then you should ensure that you get a death notification note from the hospital if someone died from hospital. And if the person died from home, you get one from the local council chairman of the area. And that's what you take to the National Identification Registration Authority, known as NIRA, commonly known as NIRA. That's where you go so that you'll be able to get a formal death certificate. You get a formal death certificate after you've filled a death notification form. You have attached your national ID, your national identification ID, as the informant or the person notifying of the death. You've paid a fee of 5,000 shillings in any bank, and you've been issued a receipt, so you attach the receipt to the documents as well as a letter from your area chairperson. And if you are a foreigner, if that is a foreigner and you've passed away in Uganda, then the money that you pay for the death certificate is not 5,000, it is $40. For those that have relatives who passed away from abroad and they have property in Uganda, and probably you want to get letters of administration to administer that property in Uganda, you go to the National Identification Registration Authority with a copy of the death certificate from that country where that person died from. You attach a national ID or passport of the deceased and yours as well. And you attach a statutory declaration duly registered by the Uganda Registration Services Bureau. A statutory declaration can be drafted by a lawyer. All these documents are accompanied with a letter to the Executive Director of the National Identification Registration Authority requesting for a death certificate to be issued. So you have a death certificate. You now can go to the Administrator General's office. You go to the office of Administrator General's office. You go to room 15 on the third floor of the office, and you buy a file. The file costs 2,000 shillings. You can sit in one of the waiting rooms and fill this form. This form requires you to provide information of the names of the deceased person and ensure that the names that are on the death certificate are the names that you fill in there. Properties that the person left, the categories of properties that the person left, did they leave a will or not, such details. After filling it out, you will be directed by the officials at the registry of the Administrator General's office to a legal officer who will look at the death certificate and the forms and now sanctioned for the opening of the file. You will go back to the registry of the Administrator General's office, and you will leave the file and the form there with a copy of your national ID as well as a copy of the death certificate. You will leave it there and you'll be given a file number. So that's the number you're going to use. Now, do not forget the original death certificate. This is because the legal officer will look at the original and confirm whether the copy that you're leaving on the file is a copy of the original, and if indeed it has been issued by the National Identification Registration Authority. Then, after sanctioning the file, he will put or she will put a note on the copy of the death certificate that he has seen or she has seen the original copy of the death certificate and sanctions the file to be opened. You will go back to the registry of the Administrator General and you will leave the file there with the filled form and the copy of the death certificate. You will be issued with a file number. That's the number you are going to use to follow up on the process while at the office of the Administrator General's office. After some days, probably a week, you will go back and you'll find that the file has been allocated to a legal officer. You will see that legal officer. The legal officer will ask you a few questions and will write a letter to the chief administrative officer of the district where the death occurred. You will take this letter to the office of the chief administrative officer of the district. If it's Kampala, you take it to Kampala Capital City Authority, and the chief administration officer of the district would probably convene a family meeting or will write to the sub-county chairperson of the area where the death occurred to hold a meeting. This is because the sub-county chairpersons usually know the people in their areas. A meeting will be convened with all the family members, and these issues pertaining to the will be discussed. And if someone died without the will, then the family will discuss so many issues, including nominating who should be the administrators of the estate of the deceased. After those meetings or meeting, minutes will be drafted and copies of the national identification cards of everyone who attended the meeting, as well as their passport photographs, should be put together and forwarded to the office of the Chief Administration Officer of the district. The Chief Administrative Officer of the district will write a letter forwarding the entire file to the office of the Administrator General. The person following up with this process should pick the file and the letter and ensure that they are delivered to the legal officer handling the file at the office of the Administrator General's office. The legal officer will have a look at the file and see if there is anything missing. Ask any questions if necessary, and if there is nothing missing, then the file will be recommended for a certificate of no objection. The person following up with this process will come back after a period of about 2 weeks to see if the Administrator General has actually assessed all the contents and documents on the file and has okayed the issuing of the certificate of no objection. If the file is ready for the issuance of the certificate of no objection, then you will be required to pay 2,000 shillings for the certificate of no objection. After you've paid that, you will wait for a period of about 3 days and you will receive a call from the Office of Administrator General that your certificate of no objection has been drafted and signed by the Administrator General. When collecting the certificate of no objection, you should ensure that you carry a copy of your national ID. The certificate of no objection will not be issued to anyone except the person appearing on it as the proposed administrator or executor of the estate of the deceased. After you have gotten the certificate of no objection, then you can proceed to file an application in court for you to be granted a grant of probate or a grant of letters of administration. When it comes to the court process, Barefoot Law can give you guidance and any other help that you will need for you to be able to file documents or this application of probate or for letters of administration in court. What I can state for now is that after you have filed the documents, you will be issued with a notice of application signed by either the magistrate or registrar of the court. You will take this signed notice of application to a media house, a print media house like New Vision, Daily Monitor, Bouquet Day, Rupuni. The purpose of advertisement is to inform the public that you've filed an application to court seeking a grant of probate or a grant of letters of administration. And if there is any person out there who has an objection to you being granted probate or letters of administration, then that person should file a caveat in court within 14 days. After 14 days, if there is no objection to your application, then court will go ahead and give you a date. That date is called the identification date. Court will give you a date where you can come and appear before the magistrate or registrar of the court, and you will be asked a few questions and be identified as the executor or administrator of the estate. On that date, you will appear before the registrar or magistrate, who will ask a few questions to verify the documentation that you filed in court. And if there are no any further questions, then court will go ahead and grant you a grant of probate or a grant of letters of administration. That grant will be sealed by court, and advise that you get from court 5 certified copies of the grant. These 5 copies are what you will use in the bank, with NSSF and any other office that you're going to go to seek access to the property of the deceased or to transfer the property of the deceased from the deceased's names to the names of the administrator and then to the names of the beneficiaries. So that is the process of obtaining letters of administration and the grant of probate.
Hello, welcome to the Know Your Law series, where Barefoot Law answers frequently asked questions on the law. Do you have employment issues? Questions about family law, criminal law, land transactions? The answers are right here on the Know Your Law series.